The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimated that nearly 870 million people were suffering from chronic undernourishment in 2012. This means that out of the 7.1 billion people that populated our planet, 1 out of every 8 were suffering from food shortages. Today, that number has dropped to approximately 805 million people, reducing the percentage to 1 out of every 10 people being affected by food insufficiency. And although recent trends speak towards global improvement, food shortage remains a problem for the global community, both for today and for the future.
To understand growing concerns for food security on the global level, we must first look at the rate of growth for global population. In 1800, estimates placed global population at approximately 900 million. Today, that number has exponentially increased to the 7.1 billion people living today. And though in the past 2 years, global growth rates have declined marginally, the scope of global population is still increasing. Particularly, the increased rate of African and Asian countries remains well above the global average. This is important as these regions are, if they are not already, becoming the most population-dense places in the world. This has a direct correlation to food insecurity, where sub-Saharan and Asian regions contain the largest burden of food-insecure populations. In other words, more population means more density, and more density means less food security. Thus, as global populations continue to rise, so too will the population of those suffering from food shortages.
But the problem is rooted in more than just population growth. Environmental, economic, and political issues all play a role as well. Environmentally, as rising global temperatures shorten the growing season across the world, they increase the risk of drought and reduce the harvest of staples such as rice and corn by 20 to 40%. Economically, as food prices trend upward across the world, affordable, sustainable diets are harder to come by. Corn, a dietary staple in Africa, was reported to have cost 15% more in the past year alone, having serious detrimental effects on food affordability and thus food availability. Politically, food shortages are being addressed or ignored to different degrees by different world governments across the globe. Whereas countries such as Finland contribute over 29 million euros a year to alleviating food shortages, other countries, such as the unstable political government in Egypt, give food shortage little merit in their political regime.
Bottom line, there is a world food shortage problem right now. This problem may be contributed to large populations, environmental shortcomings, increasing food prices, or political inaction. According to the United Nations, approximately 21,000 people die every day of hunger or hunger-related problems. This calculates to about 45 deaths since the beginning of our presentation due to hunger alone. But there are potential solutions to the global food crisis. In much the same way as the problem can be broken down into respective components, so too must the solution be multiple processes that can effectively deal with the problem when combined together.
One such solution to end the environmental causes is a trend towards vegetarian diets. The land, water, and food resources put into raising one cow is estimated to be 18 times as much as the resources needed to raise the sufficient amount of corn for the same amount of calories. And when that number is repeated for the 1.5 billion cows raised worldwide, a transition to vegetarian diets could theoretically prevent environmental catastrophe. The world can get more food for its resources if raising plant foods is prioritized over meats.
But if vegetarianism isn't your thing, then the problem can be tackled from an economic lens. One proposed solution for food prices seems logical enough: increase food aid. This may refer to the promotion of internal social support implemented by governments, such as the U.S. SNAP or food stamp program. Similarly, foreign aid is essential in relieving the economic burden of food. Institutions such as the United Nations World Food Program have been effective in staving off hunger in countries with a high percentage of food insecure populations. But for food aid to become a reasonable proposition for ending world food shortages, it must take on a global movement that it currently does not have.
A further economic proposal is the reduction of biofuel production. Producing fuel from crops, namely corn in the US and soy and palm oil in Europe, accounts for about 1/3 of recent spikes in global commodity prices. By reducing biofuel production, we can increase food surplus and decrease food shortage. Politically, the solution starts as a conversation that, if raised by enough voices, can reach the ears of world governments, spurring on a global movement that is necessary to fix a global problem. Internally, it falls on us, as US citizens, to make this a governmental issue, through political action and legislature. Now, this problem is the very root of food justice. It takes all the messed up, flawed, and unfair aspects about food equality and blows them up to a global level. Because food shortage indicates that we, as a global community, value some lives over others, that some people deserve food while others do not. And there's nothing just about that.
But how does this affect you or me? Chances are none of us in this room suffer from food insecurity. But it is our duty as members of a global community to acknowledge the food inequality present and make steps to fix it. We are privileged, and rather than take that privilege for granted, we must use it to better our world.
And though none of us can single-handedly fix this problem of truly global proportions, we can take steps in the right direction. Real solutions begin at home, with conversations over the dinner table, between family and friends about what really needs to be done.
In an era where the phrase global community is more accurate than any other time in history, we must take it upon ourselves to help balance the scales of food opportunity. And only then will the scales of justice be equal as well.
Thank you.
All right, Emily, I'm going to start with you. If you had more time, what additional research would you have done?
I think we would have researched more about food waste, which is a problem that contributes to food shortages because there is a surplus of food in certain countries that is being wasted and not utilized properly.
Okay. Griffin, you talked about how all of your solutions are to some degree not super likely to happen. There's no movement for them right now. So tell me of your three solutions, the biofuels, the vegetarianism, and the food aid. Which do you think is the most and least likely to actually take hold and why?
The most and least likely?
Let's do most likely and least
Oh,
likely.
okay, you want both. Okay. Most likely, I think that food aid is probably the best solution because, as Emily just said, is that there is food waste in certain countries, and so really you can kind of think of it as almost a matter of food balance, where there's enough food in certain countries but not enough food in other countries. So if we increase food aid, then perhaps we can more accurately distribute the food to other countries, or even within our own countries, to lessen food shortage across the world. Least likely is probably the biofuel production reduction, because honestly it's just about the money. I don't know, it's going to be hard because those are personal businesses that produce the biofuels to get government, government action involved with that, especially in our country because we're such a capitalist society. I think it'd be very difficult to get a worldwide movement that will effectively reduce biofuel production across the world.
Thank you.